The tutoring thing, we were like, was our core thing. It was what paid the bills, but it became very clear very quickly that we didn't feel like this could be really big, and we wanted to do something that was higher risk, higher reward. I think what stays consistent is what a startup needs to go through from zero to ultimate success. And pre-seed is usually the way we think about it, and we'll invest at pre-seed as well. It's kind of this team market fit.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Founders Korner. Today's episode is going remote, but I have a very special guest for you guys. We have Pablo Srugo, who is actually a founder turned VC and is actually a host of Product Market Fit show. And I'm super excited to have him on the show due to the fact that he was a founder and turned VC, and he went from being a leader in trying to pick out products and making product fit, and actually creating a show around it to help founders and startups do the same. Let's welcome Pablo. Pablo, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Good, thanks, Sep. It's great to be here.
Excellent. Pablo, I'm super excited to have you on the show, strictly because of the fact that we have very few people that go from the founders world and into the VC angel world. So why don't you give us a little background about you? How did you start, and how did you get where you are today?
Sure, I'll give you the quick story, and then we can dive into whatever part you find most interesting. So I studied economics at Carleton University in Ottawa, and really went into it thinking I wanted to be a lawyer. In fact, I wanted to be a lawyer since I was like 10 years old. I was pretty determined that was the one thing I wanted to do, and I took economics because I took one class and I liked it, and I found it was uh, you know I was well suited to do well there. And really, when it comes to being a lawyer, it's all about what grades you get plus how do you do in your LSAT. So that was really the strategy. And kind of going through it and taking some law classes in undergrad, decided that that path was really not the one for me. It was just not going to be nearly as interesting as I thought. It was going to be, very big firms, high kind of hierarchy that wouldn't fit who I am, I don't think. And so I, for the first time ever, really midway through my undergrad, realized I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And that's when I had a friend of mine who was in a similar boat. He wanted to go to med school and also decided he didn't. And so we started talking about, well, what else could we do? And the idea of starting something, of running a business, resonated with both of us. And so we started
Right.
working on like different, business plans through those years. Won a few competitions, but never really went anywhere. In fact, most of those ideas were pretty bad. And so, while this is happening, I was a TA for several courses, and going into my fourth year had come to really depend on that income to pay my rent and my bills
Okay.
and so forth. And I get this email a couple of weeks before the semester starts that they had run out of undergraduate, TA funding for undergraduate students. It was only masters and PhD students that
Wow.
would get TA-ships. So I'm like, okay. And so I did the closest thing, which was tutoring. And so I actually almost got hired by a tutoring company, but then when I decided that they were making 50% margins on me just for a website, I decided, let me just let me just
That's a true
freelance it.
entrepreneur. That's a true entrepreneur right there. It's you're making
it
too
was
much money. I'm gonna do it myself.
it was like a 20-year-old website with like keyword clouds, right? Plus
Yeah,
flyers in the
yeah.
school. They're charging $50 an hour, and I'm making 25, and I have to sign an exclusivity agreement that says I'm not allowed to tutor on my own, right? I'm like,
Right,
all
right.
right, that's a little too egregious. So I just put up some flyers, started tutoring on my own, freelance work, really nothing too special. But anyways, fast forward to like end of fourth year, and my friend and I, we had no like real ideas to move forward with. I'm doing this tutoring thing. I'd gotten to a point where I was giving tutoring to some of my friends because I didn't have bandwidth to do it. We're not talking big numbers, but it was like, it was positive, right? And so I said,
Yeah,
why don't we just expand on this and create like a university tutoring marketplace sort of thing, like tech enabled, still more services than startup, but it'll get us going. And so that's what we did. We launched My Tutor coming out of university. Um, that kind of got us going. It was interesting business because it wasn't. It was easy to run, right? Like we're talking about
right.
once we built the website and built the stuff, and during the week, it's you get a call, you assign a tutor, and you're kind of done. You're running it on 5-10 hours
Yep,
a week.
yep.
And for better or worse, we were living together. My friend and I at the time were roommates, and so we're spending the other 50 hours just brainstorming random ideas.
Right.
And that's what ended up,
So this
leading
was
to,
still on the
yeah.
back burner. You guys were still trying to figure out what's next for you guys, but the tutoring thing is kind of just like, trucking away.
Yeah, the tutoring thing we were like was our core thing. It was what paid the bills, but it became very clear very quickly that we didn't feel like this could be really big, and we wanted to do something that was
Interesting.
higher risk, higher reward.
I love it.
And so we
And
were
you want to be a
constantly coming
lawyer.
up with ideas.
I
Well,
feel
that
like
was
you
when it
have the
started.
exact, yeah, I feel like you have the engine for as an entrepreneur. So that's really interesting that you went into law school because usually law school, I find, I don't know, I mean, I'm more than happy for you to tell me if I'm wrong, but I find that, law is so structured. It's so like, it's almost black and white with a little gray in the middle, right? And it's really how you tell that story. And entrepreneurship is so not at all black and white, if there's any black and white in fact. So that's really cool. And so you were brainstorming. Sorry, I did interrupt you. So you were brainstorming
No,
on
it's all good.
ideas.
And just on that, like, I mean, I never went to law school. I did my undergrad and decided,
Right, yeah.
because of exactly what you said, that I didn't want to go that way, that it was
Right.
going to be overly detailed folk. It just wasn't going to be a good fit for me. So that's totally right. And so anyways, yeah, at some point, this idea for automatic workout tracking kind of starts to form, and we just, yeah, so we decided to jump on that kind of. We're talking 2013 now. We've been running My Tutor for
Hmm.
like 6 to 12 months, and we ended up selling My Tutor and going all in on this gym track thing. And that was like a 5-year roller coaster. I mean,
Yeah.
we went through 500 startups in SF. We raised like $6 million, and we spent $6 million. It was hardware, it was software, it was AI. It was just way too much for two young business types to take on, but we did. And so that was a 5-year journey, and I can go into that. But really, coming out of that was when one thing led to another, and I was introduced to the founders of Mistral, which is the firm I work at now, which was a seed stage firm, still is a seed stage firm
Mhm.
that invests across Canada. And I decided to join them. And so that was mid 2018, and really haven't looked back since.
And so how are you love I'm saying love. I'm assuming you love it, but how are you
Yes.
loving the transition between being a founder yourself and being now on the other side of the seat where all founders are trying to convince you, hey, this is a great idea, you need to invest in it.
It's you trading, really what it comes down to is trading depth for breadth. So with Gym
Oh, that's a good
Track,
one.
it was all about, literally, if it was gyms or hardware, it mattered, and if it wasn't, it just didn't. And so
Hmm.
anything else going on in the world was kind of irrelevant. And I think that's how intensely and insanely focused you need to be to
Yep.
even have a chance at a startup working. With with VC, it's the opposite. Like, you really can't go that deep into anything. You don't have the
Hmm.
bandwidth to do it, but you get to go into whatever you want whenever you want, right? And so
Right.
everything that's going on in the world starts to be relevant. And it
So
just really comes down to, I'll just tell you, like, I know many VC. I think most VCs I know would not be great founders, and many great founders would not make good VCs. So it's not
I
fully
agree.
translatable.
That's why I'm very interested in your story because it is not an easy transition because usually founders, exactly what you said, breadth for depth. That's like I think the best phrase I've ever heard anyone use, the transition, because we talk to angels, we talk to VCs, and reality of it is it's a completely different mindset on product and such. And as an angel, or sorry, as a founder, you're so corely focused on the product, you're so corely focused on the business model that you're right, it's literally you breathe it. That's your life. And then as a VC, um when when you guys mention seed, like what is the definition of seed to you guys? I always ask this for every angel and VC, right? Because everybody has a slightly different iteration of it. What is your guys' definition of a seed? What does that mean to you guys? What are you guys looking for?
It's a great question, and the reality is, rounds change, naming nomenclature changes, and so on. I
Mhm.
think what stays consistent is what a startup needs to go through from zero to ultimate success. And pre-seed is usually the way we think about it, and we'll invest at pre-seed as well. It's kind of this team market fit situation where you have a team with an idea, a defined market they're going after, hasn't, pre-revenue, often pre-product,
Yeah.
and that's the
We
bet.
all
And then
we
although,
we always tell that to
but
our startups, by the way, is go sell the product before you even launch. We say like go get a product advisory board. That is pretty much a sure thing that at least some of them are going to join your product because they're helping you build that product. So okay, I like that. So pre-seed is considered something where it's a product fit, at least some sort of pre-selling and team fit. Got it. Okay.
yeah, team market fit really being the core thing, and then all the way at the other extreme, which is Series A, those are always raised on the concept of product market fit, which is you have a
Yeah.
product in market, and more than anything, you're feeling true market pull. You really feel like you're solving a clear problem, and the market is, kind of that quote of pulling it out of your hands. That's like
Hmm.
the kind of definition, let's say, of
Yeah.
product market fit. And the closer you are to that, the better. In between those two things is where seed comes. And seed for us is proven value proposition. And
Okay.
so if you think about, like, if I give you an example of, let's say, some e-commerce software startup that's selling something that is going to improve the conversion, right? So let's just,
Right.
it doesn't matter what it is. The question becomes, does it actually improve conversion? If it does,
Right.
then what you have, in my opinion, at that point is proven value prop. And at that point, that's kind of the classic seed. It's like, okay, your product's actually being used by some customers, and it's the KPI you thought you were going to impact, it's actually impacting. The value you thought you were going to deliver is proven. That's seed. Then from
Yeah.
there, you've got to go from a handful of customers to way more customers and understand your ICP and understand, your niche and all
Yeah.
these sort of things. So you're at a point where the stuff just flying off, off the shelves. Then that's kind of product market fit. So that's the way we think about
Yeah,
it.
that's brilliant because the way I always say it is that pre-seed is product fit, and then pre-seed is market fit. You're trying to find that market and figure out what the value prop looks like, and then Series A is growth. How do you scale it to the next level? Once you have the product, now you have the market fit. Now you go, okay, how do I expand this business to go to market, basically, right? So yeah, you're pretty much in line with exactly how I would imagine pre-seed. What is the number one um, advice you have at being a founder yourself and being on the other side of seed now? What is the number one advice you have for most early stage founders? This could be pre-seed, seed stage startups.
I think the number one reason why really early stage, pre-product market fit companies fail, I would say this applies to 80-90% of the companies that I've seen fail, is that they're really not solving an important enough problem. And
Mm.
so the number one piece of advice becomes, make sure you're solving a number one and number two priority problem for your customers.
Are you talking about
And
TAM specifically, like the target market? Like, is it a big enough of a market, or are you talking about like a problem where it's like people are willing to like it becomes incredibly sticky because that's how much of a problem you're solving?
I'm almost yeah, it's a great clarifying question. I'm almost specifically not talking about TAM. I think
Okay.
focusing on market size in the early days can easily lead you astray because it's easy to get
Yep.
hyped up on big Gartner reports and whatnot. What I'm talking about is clear value delivery. Like that is the
Mm-hmm.
number one sign that things are going to work in the long run, is if your customers are getting true value. And in order for them to get true value, you need to first actually uncover a problem that is a true number one or number two priority problem. It's easy
Right.
enough to have a thing and go to 10 people and say, hey, like, would you buy it? And have them be like, yeah, I would buy it. It's a totally different thing to go to those 10 people and say, like, hey, what's your number one problem? And they're like, it's X, it's X. And you hear that over and over. And now you're kind of, if you can solve that, you're going to meet them where they are, right? You're going to solve a
Right.
top of mind problem. That's one of the, and that's why oftentimes, because you don't go through those motions and you don't uncover a problem that's really number one or number two, you're constantly in this push motion where you're trying to convince people to buy your product, to buy
Right.
your product, and you're
Mm-hmm.
and you're just almost unable to transition into what you want, which is this kind of pull motion. And if you start off that way, it's going to be near impossible to get to, $100 million in revenue.
Got it. I couldn't agree more. I mean, the solving of the problem. The one thing I'll say though right now is it's easy to build and I'm sure you can attest to this, it's easy to build a simple product and launch, and that's the easiest thing to do. And I feel like so many companies and startups have done that. How do you suggest navigating the world today with so many products, so many platforms, products, softwares? Like so many people are solving the problem. How do you suggest like a founder trying to navigate the world? Like how do you find that problem? What's your suggestion on tackling that issue? Because I think,
Look, the way
and to clarify, like for example, if you look at today, the market, you can find almost any product for anything. Like if you Google anything, like I'm having a problem with this software, and it'll pop up. I'm sure of it. So how do you suggest, like, founders navigating that? Because I agree with you. I think the problem is the number one thing, but I think so many people have solved so many different problems that there's a problem within that itself. That there's too
Yeah,
many
it's totally
products.
fair. There's a lot. I mean, and especially in the software and SaaS world, like there's so many things that have already been solved. I think if you go and I've kind of looked through a lot of the biggest companies and thinking and kind of trying to create these frameworks of how they came up with their idea. And as far as I could see, there's effectively four ways to come up with an idea, which is really what we're getting at here. And I would argue if so the way that most bad ideas get formed, including as an example, Gym Track, which I would consider
Hmm.
a bad idea, right? Which is my previous startup, is this kind of like, wouldn't it be cool if, right? So like you've got a
Right.
founder who somehow for some reason thinks to himself, man, wouldn't it be cool if you could do blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And then they go all in on that thing, right? And for
Yep.
us, wouldn't it be cool if your workouts were tracked? Wouldn't it be cool?
Yep.
I was talking to the founders of Pluto who now have a successful startup, but originally they were trying to get businesses to pay using Bitcoin. And it was like, wouldn't it be cool if you could use Bitcoin to transact? Like, and the challenge with that is that you're not actually ingrained enough in the lives of your customer. And so
Yep.
that idea is often just, it's just, yeah, it rarely leads to something good. So what does lead to something good? And I've kind of seen like four frameworks, right? Two of them are pretty well known, pretty established, right? So one is, just scratching your own itch. So you actually
Yep.
find a problem in your own life. You're obviously an expert of your own life, and you see something that actually isn't solved, and you go ahead and you solve it. That's like the how Shopify was born, right? Like Toby
Yep.
didn't have an e-commerce platform he could use to sell snowboards, so he built it, and then you get Shopify. So that's like one.
Yep.
That's one framework. Another framework is like the 10x better product, which again, very classically well
Oh,
known.
sorry.
It's like you get stung
So,
there.
yeah, no, something something creeped me out from right here. Sorry, continue. Yeah. So, can we go back from the Shopify part, the snowboard?
So yeah, framework number one, which is very common, like scratch your own itch. So this is like
Right.
Toby tries to sell snowboards online, doesn't have a good e-commerce platform he can use, so he decides to build one, and it so happens that other people have that problem as well. So then you get
Right.
Shopify. The other one, which is really classic, is create a 10x better product. And so this is where you find a product in the market like a WebEx, which does not solve the problem well. It's kind of a garbage product, and you find a way to build something that's truly 10x better, like a Zoom.
Yeah.
So that's another kind of framework. Those are two pretty classic frameworks that tend to work to create actually good startups. Why is that? One of them, when you think about scratching your own itch, you are an expert in your own life. So if you can't find
Right.
the product, it is a real problem. And the question becomes, are you alone, or is there a million of you that has that problem?
Yeah.
That's the kind of assumption. When it comes to 10x better products, you have a product that's already in market. And so clearly there's already demand for that product. And the key
Hmm.
question is your product truly 10x better, or is it like 10% better, right? So that's where the key risk lies in that framework. The other one is become an expert in an industry and find true unsolved problems. And I think this is one where it's the most actionable from a founder's
I agree.
perspective, because
I
you
agree.
can look at markets that you find interesting, that you find compelling, and truly become experts. What does it take to become experts? Like this is like the 10,000 hour kind of Malcolm Gladwell
Yeah.
thing, right? Like either you've worked in this industry for decades and you know this stuff, or you've got to get really explicit about becoming an expert. And just so you know, like, and I spoke with many founders about this, the ones that have done true research, like they're doing hundreds of interviews. It's not 10 or
Yep.
20 customer interviews.
Yep.
They're going and they're talking to 500 type. Like that's literally the number that I keep hearing. So now when you do that, you get to truly understand the customers in that industry, understand what their day is like, understand what their challenges are, and find actually meaningful unresolved problems versus superficial problems that you think are real but are actually for whatever reason not, and won't
Yeah.
lead to buyers. And the last one, just for completion, is almost the hardest one, I think, to action, and the one that can really lead to a stray, but can also lead to massive opportunities, which is a top-down approach used by like a Jeff Bezos, right? And so this is,
Right.
you identify a trend like the internet exploding, and you go from that trend to, the internet's exploding. What should I build? Oh, well, maybe selling things online will be a big deal. Or maybe selling books is a good idea because it's easy to sell books. Let's go sell books online. Like that's kind of how, or like Elon
Yep.
Musk, the way he comes up from batteries to deciding that he wants to get into electric cars. So like that's a top down approach. Easily can lead you astray because you read a Gartner report and it sounds like this market's
Yep.
going to explode and you don't know enough about the market, whatever. But those are the 4 ways I think you can find problems that are truly worth solving.
Well, yeah, in the fourth case scenario, I mean, you got AI right now. It's
Correct.
blowing up. It's everybody is an expert now. I think the other day, one of my friends actually shared a post where there's a job opening and they're looking for an AI engineer, but they're not no requirements on engineering, computer science, nothing like that. And it's kind of like, you're getting into the world of the number four, which is I read a report and I think this would be a good fit. What about I really like the 10,000 hour concept because I every time we do talk to founders, the first thing we say is, "Are you an expert?" and "What makes you the expert?" Right? Because if you look at a lot of the people who have had those conversations, they're the ones in the weave of it all. I guess it kind of relates back to your one, which is solve your own itch kind of concept, right? How do you how do you target like how do you go about doing it? Because realistically, it does take a team to build. Let's stick to specifically SaaS, right? Like you need a team behind you to be able to help you out. How do you suggest getting even this thing started? Let's say you have an idea. Let's say you've had 50 conversations with 50 people. You're pretty much on the money in terms of what you're looking for to building. What is your suggestion on what's the next steps for them? What should they do? What is the most ideal scenario for them?
Yeah, so I mean, and hopefully it really is going from 50 to 500. I think
Yeah, yeah,
conversations,
of course.
and I don't mean to be facetious, but that really is the thing, and I was surprised to hear just how much it takes to go from like a high level kind of cool idea to something that's actually going to work. And just the details that you refine over those conversations are so critical. So I think that, and then it's just a matter of kind of scaffolding your way to a fully fledged, kind of classic MVP. I think though a lot of what I've seen a lot of founders do wrong, like, is almost too too eager to embrace like the lean startup methodology, which I think
Yes.
has been great to optimize solutions. But what often happens is a founder will do like these 10, 20 conversations and be like, oh, I've got something, I got to create an MVP and I got to get it out there and see what happens.
Yes.
And what you're doing when you do that too early is if you imagine like every problem is like a hill, and you found this little tiny hill that maybe is actually like really hard to climb, and you're going up that hill and you're trying to go up that hill and you put it on MVP and you see if it works and you see if it works. And maybe best case scenario, you climb that hill, which by the way is really hard to climb and it's tiny. You didn't realize that there was a massive hill over there. If only you would ask better questions, if only you would have done better research,
Hmm.
that was easier to climb and bigger, right? And so you're
Right.
optimizing for the wrong things. And so I think that's one of the hardest steps um, in value creation, right? I mentioned like seed is all about creating true value. One of the hardest
Hmm.
steps is staying in this kind of research mode for long enough,
Right.
because what a founder is, the DNA of a founder is a builder. That's who founders are by definition. We want to
Yes.
build, we want to sell. The last thing we want to do is research. It's just not the thing that we're not academics, we're not
No,
scientists.
no founder likes research. I'll tell you that right now.
Exactly. And there's a psychological element to that as well, by the way, which is if you are in this quote unquote research mode, and I mean, you still go and you like have family, you have friends. People always ask, like, what are you up to? Right? What are you doing? I'm a
Hmm.
lawyer, I'm a this. You're like, I'm a founder. Oh, cool. What's your startup? Oh, I don't know. Right. I don't know because
Yeah,
I'm in
yeah,
research.
yeah,
Like, I don't, it's
yeah.
so awkward. And so that's usually you don't, nothing, everything tells you not to do that. Everything tells you to just go out there, put something out, start selling. And so, because of those things, because of those psychological elements, founders rush through this discovery piece and they'll put out an MVP and they'll start iterating on it. And maybe if they get lucky, they find something and they solve a problem, but it's a small problem and it's hard to really, and they get stuck in push mode. And if they're
Yeah.
unlucky, the thing just totally doesn't work and they have to do like some sort of hard pivot. So I think that's the, if you ask me like, what's the right thing to do after you've done some conversation, you feel like you've got something, is do way more, like get to, and through that, by the way, you're going to find, because I know what you're trying to get to, like, but at some point through that, you're going to find, for example, your first few customers, you're going to
Hmm.
find potentially even your first few advisors who are like industry experts because you've had these conversations with them and they've bought into what you're trying to do. And then, like, frankly, one of the hardest pieces, once you really are sure and you've done hundreds of interviews and you feel like this is a legitimate thing, is finding those co-founders. And frankly, like, there is no magic formula. The reality is, if you look at startups that have worked, like most of them that have co-founders, I mean, most of them were people that were already building stuff together, like
Yeah.
Wozniak and Steve
And Steve
Jobs,
Jobs. Yeah.
or Toby and Scott Lake and so on, that were building Shopify. It wasn't like, oh, founder did this and then went out and did these motions in order to find a co-founder. Honestly, that's like, I don't have good answers for that side of it.
Right. Yeah. And so, how realistic do you think it is to? Yeah, I agree with you. Most founders are not researchers, and to be honest, they ask terrible questions, and their questions. You can tell me your experience. In my opinion, their questions are leading questions, which is a big no-no in the research world, right? You kind of ask the questions in a way. Well, founders do. They ask questions in a way where they're kind of like pushing you towards giving the answer they want to hear, right? Because no founder wants to get hurt. No founder wants to know their idea is not good, right? So what is your suggestion on how to approach that? Because realistically, you have to, like, I've taken research in university. I've done research. We've had a podcast with a researcher. We hire a researcher. We don't do our own research because it's not easy. How do you suggest someone doing that? Is it best to give that to someone else and get the list and put it together? Or are you just saying have those casual conversations? They will not, because I also find casual conversations also make the founder um, not tunnel vision, but kind of become like they get too much information. And then they try to process too much information and then it kind of like leads them to a dark path as well, no?
It's an interesting thought. I mean, I honestly, like, the challenge is, I think, it's the founder's job to be as close as possible to the small details of their customers,
Hmm.
like all
I agree
really
with that.
small.
Yeah.
And so I do think that ultimately, look, the reality is we can talk about this all day, and still founders, first time founders are going to rush through this
Just
stuff
start the
because
product. Yep, absolutely.
I think more than anything, they want to build and they want to sell, and like that's just
Yes,
not
that's
going
right.
to change. That's just the reality of it. But one thing to think about is like, look, if you're serious about this is a 7 to 10 year journey. And
Yes.
wouldn't you much rather spend a few more months up front to make sure that that journey is worthwhile, to make sure that you're going after the biggest thing, the most impactful thing that you could go after, versus rush through those early months just because you want to get going and then end up wasting many years, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, because you realize you've built something that is just a nice to have, which happens like all the time.
So I actually love that you brought up the 7-10 year rule. Um, I think the biggest reason why most of them do not take that time, and I agree with you. I think most startups need to understand that this is a 7-10 year process, but they don't consider it that way, right? That what the way they look at it is, I might become rich in 3 years because that's the stories they've heard, right? Like you want to consider it misinformation, we can consider it misinformation, but like reality of it all is the fact that most founders go as fast as possible because they think things should be done in 3, 4, 5 years. So how do you change that mindset? Because I think that's a mindset issue rather than them understanding that this is a set. Because I always say it takes 10 years for you to be an overnight success. That's not like, it's the same concept of the 10,000 hours. It's kind of like that trend, right? But it takes you 10 years to be an overnight success. And a lot of new founders that we see all the time, They do not understand that, nor do they want to understand. They kind of believe that their idea is the $1 million idea and they're going to be massive in 3 years. How do you kind of go and kind of give them that information? Hey, this is a 7-10 year process. Take your time, actually build a profitable business, which is what we're all in for.
It's like the $1 million question, right? At the end of the
Yeah.
day, and the flip side to it, by the way,
And
is like there's obviously value to founders having the other mindset, right? Like, which is like,
yes,
yeah, I
yes,
understand the average is 7 to 10 years, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to crush it in 3. Like,
yes.
there's something that you get from that confidence, and even like risk adjusted starting a startup might not be that logical, and so you kind of need these people
Yeah,
to be illogical almost in order for them to keep
you
creating
have to
the
be.
sort of innovations that the world needs, right? And so
Yeah,
there's kind of I guess a balance there. Part of it, I think, just comes with time. Like as you go and you do, let's say, the wrong motions, you then decide like, okay, like what's going on here? Like for me, I went through gym track, right? I did 5 years, and
hmm
then after that, you start thinking like, okay, how could I have figured those things out faster? Like what didn't I do right, and so on. And so repeat founders tend to come at this from a different perspective,
which is why they're more fundable. A
which is
lot
why
of VCs,
generally
yeah,
they do. And I think the
yeah,
way I look at it is just in startup land, mistakes are unavoidable, but avoidable mistakes are unaffordable. And
yeah,
that's really what it comes down to, is like the repeat founders. It's not that they don't make mistakes; they just make less avoidable mistakes. And
yeah,
and that's really one of the keys to just dialing up your odds of success, is knowing what mistakes you truly can avoid and making sure you avoid them.
yeah. When a founder wants to approach an angel or a VC, what's the best time to do that, in your opinion? And how is the best way to do it?
I think there's kind of two frameworks. Like one is for the later, for like the seed, and then certainly for the Series A is my there's a different path I think for that than kind of your angel rounds. So like the angel rounds, I think, and let's talk about a first time founder. Like if you're a repeat founder, a successful repeat founder, especially, it's very easy for you to raise $1 million or $2 million,
Yep,
and I don't think you need much money. So let's say you're a first time
yep,
founder without really much of a network, and you're trying to raise like your first angel round. I think the smartest thing to do is to spend a lot of time in the really early days getting as much, like just having as many meetings that are more like advice type meetings, and you might
hmm
want to join accelerators and things like that. I think like I joined Founders Startups was really useful. Obviously, the better the accelerator, like YC, will go way
yeah. Of
further than
course,
some
that's
non-brand
yeah,
name accelerator. So like all
yeah,
those
yeah.
things help, but you really do want to have as many of these discussions with advisor types as possible. And what you're trying to do is kind of pull them in, get more and more buy-in. These are advisors that could theoretically be angels, but the thing is, you're unlikely to raise an angel round when you have like true meaningful traction. And so if you
hmm
kind of wait and you're like, okay, I'm ready, let's go raise a round, and you don't have any sort of pre-established relationships built, it's going to be really hard to get half a
hmm
million dollars across the line. And so if you just start by doing these kind of low stakes relationship building, advice seeking kind of
Yep.
exercise, and you kind of get those going, or I've seen work is you get those going, over time, you make progress in your startup, you're making sure to communicate that to these kind of relationships you're building, and then some sort of catalyst event starts, whether it's something really meaningful happens within your startup, or maybe it's somebody raising their hand and being like, hey, like you should really think about raising a round, like I'd be interested in participating, like something like that. And then you flip it, and now you've got this pool of like warm leads, let's say, that you can go
hmm
to and be like, hey, this person wants to invest $50,000, so I'm going to raise 200K, I'm going to raise 500K, I'm going to raise a million, whatever. Are you interested? And it's not starting from zero. So I think that's the best way to do that part of it. When it comes to the later rounds, like the seed and Series A rounds that you're raising more often than not from institutional VCs whose full-time job it is to do this, it's a bit different. I still think there's real value in. Then there's this whole debate about like, do you establish relationships or do you kind of just not?
Yep.
And there's really two. There's I think it's a bit of a false dichotomy. Like in a sense, I feel you should kind of do both. The best place to be in that I've seen is if you can get yourself to a seed or Series A with a handful of warmed like VCs that you have had multiple 3, 4 discussions with, that have kind of tracked you, and so they're warmed up and you know them. So there's a bit of a relationship because you are taking a risk. You're going to sell 10, 20% of your
Right.
business to someone.
Yep.
You're hoping that it's going to be a good fit, right? And so you've done that. But then when you actually go out to raise, these are the difference between angels and VCs. VCs are easy to identify. They have websites. Like you can really run a
Yeah.
process if you want.
Yeah.
Angels are harder to find. And so when
Angels
you
are
do go out
very
to raise,
challenging to find. Yeah. Angels are
correct, like
very
top of the
hard.
funnel. So
Yes.
that's why you kind of got to go one by one and kind of build this thing. Whereas with VCs, it's not a bad idea to have three, four, five of them that you have these deeper relationships with that have tracked you, because not only does it give you feedback, it also kind of gives you a leg up when you do go out to fundraise, because those
Right.
conversations start pretty aggressively. But then you also add to it 30, 40, 50 brand new VC kind of hits, so
Right.
that you're really running a tight process. Because the reality is, like, FOMO is just one of your best friends when it comes to
Yep.
getting around raised effectively and quickly at terms that are favorable to you. And so
Yep.
you do have to find a way to leverage that. I find there's oftentimes founders that do only one or the other. Like some founders will be like, "Oh, I've got these 5, 6 VCs. I want to raise from one of them. I don't want to go cold, and I don't want to, kind of go and spray and
Hmm.
pray, whatever." And there's the other ones like, I don't want to build relationships. I'm just going to wait. And then when I'm really ready, I'm going to press go on 60.
Right.
I think the optimal solution is to honestly is to do both. And, and yeah, I think because having those relationships helps you craft your story, but it also helps you start with an edge. And then I think having those 50 or so kind of, colder relationships all go at the same time is going to build FOMO. It's going to build momentum.
And I think a lot of people, what people don't realize is VCs and angels, well, angels maybe less so, but VCs for sure are looking for that deal pipeline. They're willing to have conversations. You shouldn't be scared of VCs, in my opinion, because they're also looking out to see what's the next new big thing, right? Like they need to spend the money that they raised in order to make a return for their LPs, right? So I think you're bang on with the relationship thing. I think that's a really neat idea because I think that can really help reduce. Because I think a lot of people don't realize it takes 6 months to a year to raise money, right? And and if you don't have any of those relationships, you're looking more towards the 12 months versus the 6 months, right? I think people just really they think, hey, tomorrow I'm going to start raising. I'll raise it by 3 months. I'm crushing it, right? And it's just not that fast. Like you'd have to be in a completely different mind space to do that. So couldn't agree more. Where can people find? Because I think today we talked a lot about product market fit and trying to figure out what that fit looks like, where you can pick at, and makes total sense because your show is all about that. Where can they find your show and like tell us more about the show?
So yeah, I mean, so the firm, by the way, is called Mistral, and so we're a seed stage firm.
Mistral,
We
yep.
invest across the nation, cross verticals. We write usually first check is about $1 million, and we can follow, but we're happier to lead rounds. We have a really simple mission. We just want to work with best founders in Canada and build startups that matter. And that's really what we've
Okay.
been doing for the last 10 years, and what we'll be doing for next many decades
How
to come.
how big is your fund?
So we're on
And
our third fund now, and it's a
okay.
$55 million fund.
And are you guys across Canada only, or are you North America?
We do a bit in the US, maybe 20% or
Okay.
so in the US, and so we'll look at things that come in, but in terms of our strategy, it's really around Canada.
Canadian. Okay, cool. And then product market fit show, where do they find it?
Yeah, and so Mistral is Mistral.vc, and then the product market fit
Perfect.
show is a show that we started kind of within the firm, and where we interview founders of late stage startups, but we go really
Love
deep
it.
on the pre-product market fit stage. Like, so we don't
Hmm.
really look at all the other stuff. The goal is really simple. Is, frankly, I started because I wanted to become an expert on product market fit.
Yep.
And I think people who listen also want to become experts on product market fit. Maybe they're early
Yep.
stage founders, maybe they're early stage VCs, but either way, they have a vested interest in becoming an expert at product market fit. So that's what we're doing, is we're dissecting it through interviews, through other types of episodes where we just kind of pull out some of the best observations from different founder stories again, but it's
Hmm.
really zero to product market fit, and it's available on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify and kind of all the
Love
podcast
it.
player, called the Product
Love
Market
it.
Fit Show.
Because I do agree. I think a lot of startups need to understand what it means to have product market fit, because a lot of them do run before they can crawl. or even walk, right? And I
Good
always
way to
say,
put it.
like,
Yes.
if you start crawling and you start walking a little bit, start running. Sure, like you'll fall and you'll learn, but as long as you're learning, whatever it is, what it is. But yeah, that's exactly why most companies and most startups pivot within the first 3 years, because they didn't take that time and approach like you're mentioning. So I love what you're saying, and I'm definitely a big fan of research. Like, we do it all the time. I think you're right. There has to be a balancing act, and it's just not something seen very often, right? So,
Awesome. Well, glad you liked it.
all right, awesome, Pablo. Thanks so much for taking the time and being with us here today, and helping our startups and founders kind of get a better guide as to where they should be in the next 3 years. Like I said, like you said, sorry, it is a 7-10 year journey. So strap in, lots of ups and lots of downs, right? So, awesome. To everybody at home, thanks so much for listening. If you're interested in Pablo's show, do follow, try to find them on it's called Product Market Fit Show, and it's available on Apple, you said, right, Pablo? Apple and
Yeah,
Spotify.
Apple or Spotify. That's right. Yep.
Perfect. Awesome. And if they have any questions, should they follow you on LinkedIn or anything like that?
Sure.
Like, okay, cool. So we'll put your LinkedIn as well. So if you have any questions for Pablo, feel free to comment down below. We'll definitely pass it off, or you can follow him on LinkedIn. Awesome. Until next time, guys, like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time. Corridor out.